My own name is Dan Potts. I'm actually the founder and CEO of The Career Coach. So what I always find is really helpful in these sort of scenarios, and when I talk about CV sins in general, I like to just give a bit of background on myself. The reason being is really just to highlight that no career strategy or no career path is a straightforward one. My own career path was very interesting, I would say, in terms of being up, down, twists, turns, all that sort of fun stuff. And the reason I bring that up is because I've gone through scenarios where I was given very poor advice. I was given scenarios where I wasn't sure what I want to do. I was facing loads of different career transitions that I want to achieve over my own career path. And that just allowed me to figure out an awful lot of the framework, strategies and methodologies that weren't really that apparent a couple of years ago, and certainly are becoming more apparent and more relevant now. But it's helped me steer my own ship in terms of where I want to go, and largely that's where we've been able to help tens of thousands now, thankfully, over the last few years do the exact same. So my own career path started out as a carpenter. Having done loads of psychometric testing and everything else, I couldn't be further from somebody that should be a carpenter. Thankfully, I didn't kill myself, and more importantly, I didn't kill anybody else. So as part of that, I then went and worked in multiple different roles, worked internationally and domestically, worked with consultancies, worked in recruitment. And one of the big things that I found when I was working in those fields was there was very little support given in general, or it was very inaccessible to figure out how you can build an effective career strategy or an effective career. It's typically where our career decisions are based on our peer network. So depending on your peer network, the likelihood of your success is dependent on the advice that you get. And unfortunately, we're very dependent on that. So now what we're seeing, and obviously the Jobs Expo is a really good example of that, we're seeing a huge amount more clarity being brought into the market. The types of opportunities that are available, the types of careers that are coming out of the woodwork is incredible. But that wasn't available 10, 15 years ago. It's still not, we're still only tipping the iceberg now. So for us, really, that's what we're focused on. You'll see it there for our mission and vision. It's actually all about breaking down the barriers of entry to the job market. That's what we've been working on. We're very passionate about what we do. You'll probably see an awful lot of our team, as I mentioned earlier, wearing these T-shirts around. That's some of the team. We've launched across multiple locations in Ireland. We're launching internationally now, in Barcelona now next month. We've launched in California already. There's a massive opportunity in the market for people to figure out what they want to do. We're now in a zone where you don't have to stick with just a job that you've fallen into. You can actually choose what you want to do and find a way to do it and make it a reasonable earning potential for yourself based on what your own requirements or expectations are. So that's the beauty about where we are now, and the opportunity to work anywhere in the world. So, sorry, I thought the mission and vision was already up there, but there it is there. One, the other piece that we also work on, so on the other side of our business, we also work on the recruitment side. So organizations that are similar to that here, but some of them are on the board already, on how they're actually creating challenges in the job market as opposed to opening it up and being able to identify quality talent such as yourselves. So we work with them on improving their own go-to-market strategy to ensure that we can also not only just advise people how to overcome the barriers of entry to the job market, we can start breaking them down on the other side when it comes to businesses. And a lot of what I'll talk to you about today is what's working in the market, what's not working, what we see daily, which seems like simple stuff, but it's very easy when you're caught in the vacuum of trying to apply all the time or figure out what you want to do. It's very easy to make these mistakes when we're trying to run very, very, very quickly. So we're just going to give you some simple steps that are going to help you, and then hopefully that will support you on that next step. Sound good? I will ask for an awful lot of engagement because CV, while it's a really great topic and really important, it's a flat document. It's something that we have to use. It's not always going to be that interesting, so I'm going to ask for as much engagement as I possibly can just to keep it moving and make sure you're getting as much value from it as possible. Does that sound fair enough? Deadly. So, we jumped one step. Quick bit of background on ourselves. These are the structures and strategies we offer. You'll see it's pretty common now in the market to offer this sort of stuff. We actually design this sort of framework. Either you're taking the first step, your next step in your career, so you're working on that job seeker framework. Either you're looking for that new step in your career because you're not trying to figure out where you're going, so you're kind of falling into that career changer category, or you're moving up in your particular field and you're looking for that career progression. All right, so you'll see that pretty commonly across the board. But the reason we have these programs is because the armhost, someone getting stripped in the front row here. Not to call attention to you or anything. So these sort of programs, the reason we set these up is because for us, your career should be simplistic in terms of the strategy you're following and how you do it. All right. So these sort of strategies are very focused on outcomes That's the most important thing. Coaching can be very broad, can be very boil the ocean style approach. This is all about outcomes, and that's what we're all about at the Career Coach. So enough about us. We're going to talk a little bit about career strategy to begin with. So who would say they have a career strategy? Cool. One. Anyone else? All right. So it's in no way is that a criticism. Unfortunately, when it comes to career strategy, it is not something we are taught. It is not something that it comes up on a regular basis. It is not something that comes up when someone asks, what do you want to do with your career? Then go, what's your career strategy? It's a rare question to get, but it is such an important piece of the jigsaw because you cannot figure out the tools like CVs, like LinkedIn, like your cover letter, like even your interview strategy. You cannot figure that out unless you know where you're going. Because unfortunately what's happening is we're putting the cart before the horse. We are not actually planning out where we're going, and therefore we cannot create effective documentation to get us there. Does that make sense? So the big thing that we work on, and always our talk is recipe for success, is the right effort with the right strategy will get you the right result. One without the other will not get you there, unfortunately. Now the benefit is you're here, so you're obviously putting in good effort. Sometimes we have to measure that. Sometimes we have to increase that. Sometimes we have to tweak that. But the strategy piece is key. One without the other will not get you there. All right. So one of the things we're going to start with now is, of course, career strategy. So there's 4 fundamentals that I want you to remember for career strategy. You have to have clarity on what it is. It has to be focused on an outcome. It cannot be, I want to do something. It has to be, I want to do this. What is that thing? That's different for everybody, but it has to be clear. Has to be focused on an area. You have to also be able to, which is the famous phrase now, pivot. You have to be adaptable. If you cannot adapt to what's happening in the market, unfortunately what happens is it reduces your opportunities, and we're seeing it more and more, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail soon. The other side is you have to have action. As much as we all want to be saved, nobody's coming to save us. All right, so we have to be able to grab the bull by the horns. We have to be able to take that action and make sure we implement stuff. And that doesn't mean it's always going to be easy. That absolutely not. Especially in this market, and it was talked about earlier on, we're at a very high employment rate. We are, but that doesn't mean everyone's in the right job that they're trying to work in. Yeah, we might have a high employment rate, which is the statistics thrown around all the time, but that does not mean we have the people in the right employment. Very, very different, and equally, there's still a huge amount of people that are unemployed that fall into that category or struggling to get into the market. And yes, there's massive booms in certain markets, but there's equally massive declines in others. So how do you manage that? How do you know what's happening in your market? How do you manage that competition? It's making sure that you understand these areas. Who here has heard of a SWOT analysis? Deadly. Anyone use it on their career out of curiosity? No? Or on their skill set? Probably a better way of phrasing that. Okay. So we do this regularly with clients, and it's really, really important because it's something you can do on an ongoing basis. The markets move, and I'll give you a perfect example now. I was chatting to someone earlier on about this sort of stuff. If you take a developer as an example, a software developer, right now, and certainly in the last 12 to 18 months, AI could have been seen as a massive threat, and probably is, to be fair. Still is, depending on how you leverage it. But the developers that are going to be out of work or going to be impacted in a negative way by AI are the ones that don't master it. All right? It's the same with accounting. If you do not master AI, you will be impacted by it. If you master AI, you will always have an opportunity. Because in the same way, most planes fly themselves now, but you still need a pilot in the cockpit. Right? Same idea. So when it comes to this sort of stuff, mapping out skills, mapping out what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, where the opportunities and where the threats are so important, because a threat can be an opportunity and vice versa, depending on how you view it and depending on how you approach it. So mapping this out regularly will help. Once you've done that, we then need to look at what our transferable skills are. The reason we do this, and we'll get into it a little bit later on, is it allows us to map out what skills are our mainstays, so what skills are applicable across any role we're applying for, and what ones then maybe don't fall into that category. The reason it's also important is if you decide, we go back to pivoting, if you decide, actually, as a quick show of hands, any accountants in the audience? One? Cool. Do you like it? Yeah, love it. Okay, cool. You're about on the line of 50-50 in accounting at the minute. And it's not a criticism. Loads of my friends are. Loads of them have now moved on from it. But in the same way you look at transferable skills, a lot of people will pivot probably around that kind of 35 to 40 age bracket. Typically will pivot into a new career because they've worked in a specific field for a certain period of time and then decide, you know what, it's not for me anymore. I'm going to do something else. This particular knowledge will help you identify what areas you can move into very, very quickly and make that pivot much more effective and much quicker. All right, so knowing your transferable skills on an ongoing basis is really important. Who's heard of SMART goals? Cool. People use them regularly, not regularly? Anyone? Yeah? One of the easiest frameworks to ever follow, one of the easiest ones to also get wrong. Most people will go to about realistic, sometimes not even. They'll go to, is it achievable, and then stop there. They won't actually put a time frame on it because we're afraid to fail a lot of the time. There should be no fear to fail, especially when you're searching for a role or trying to figure out what you're trying to do with your career. You're going to fail. You're going to mess up regularly. Okay? Accept it. We move on from it. We then set a time frame on it. The reason we set a time frame on it is because you are 80% more likely to achieve your goal if you've set a time frame on it. You might not achieve it in that time frame, but you are 80% more likely to achieve the goal in general if you put a time frame on it. That's how impactful that piece is. Yet, unfortunately, people get to about achievable and realistic and stop. All right? Because we are afraid to fail at times, and that's okay. But understanding that there's such an important step to happen. So when you're coming to your career, setting out smart goals around what you're trying to achieve on an annual basis is really, really important. Once we've done that, and once we've figured out where we're going and what we're trying to achieve, we then need to research and explore the day-to-day. So let's think about, I'm going to go back to accountancy, and I'm not, in no way am I bashing it, right? My sister is an accountant. The whole thing with accountancy, and the biggest reason why they have such a transient nature in terms of people getting to a certain stage or a certain age and moving out of the field, and why at that level they're struggling to find people, is because a lot of people going into it weren't aware of what the day-to-day was going to look like. They didn't understand what 80 to 90% of the job was, and they weren't equally, had they known that, would they have been 80 to 90% happy to do that for the rest of their lives? Had they known that, they probably wouldn't have done it, or a large percentage of that would move out of it later wouldn't have done it. So knowing what field you're going into and what the day-to-day looks like is really, really important. As much as I'm very happy in what I do, I'm also not 100% happy every single day. It's physically impossible to achieve, but 85, 90% happy each day, apart from the admin side of things, is where you really want to be. So understanding that, and it's really easy. The benefit now with LinkedIn, with everything else, you can actually reach out to people in the field, and people are pretty open. People want to actually share their story, share their information on what they're seeing day to day to see if that's the field. Now, that's if you're trying to pivot, if that's you're trying to figure out where you're going next, or is that career path still for you. It's a really great opportunity to do it. The other piece is skill development. There is a massive difference between going and get a qualification and a skill and developing skills, right? There is a big thing, because we do see it regularly. They're both important. There's nothing wrong with either one, but you have to do both all on an ongoing basis. Now in today's market and moving forward in the next 10 years, education will play a part, but it will not play the same part it's played in the last 10. Education was a massive thing. Skill development will be the biggest thing for the next 10 years. Most organizations, and we've seen some of them earlier on, are moving to skills-based organizations, which what that means is they're looking within their organization and externally based on skills and value and each individual's ability to pivot, to move, to progress in the role, not to go and get a different qualification, but to actually develop skills that are going to add value to the business now and moving forward. So skill development is going to be one of your keys to having a really strong career and a more of a future-proof career strategy. Does that make sense? And lastly, network, network, network. Your network is your net worth, and you'll hear that regularly, but it is so important. Today is a really good example. Make sure you're going around all the different stands. Even if you're not interested in the jobs, even if you're not interested in that organization, still have the network, because you don't ever know how your paths are going to cross later. The more you have in your network, it doesn't have to be now, it doesn't have to be straight away to add value. It's more about the long term. You never know how paths can cross. So the more people you meet, the more opportunity you will create for yourself. It's a proven fact, but also opening up the fact that leveraging your network on an ongoing basis can also open up referral opportunities, which is the most effective way to get a job. Make no mistake, using recruiters, fine. I work in recruitment, I know, I get it. But it's the most effective way to get a job now is actually through getting a referral into a business, especially if it's a large organization. So, the what, the why, and the how. So, what is a CV? Anyone know? If we boil it down to its essence, what's a CV? Say again? So, it is a curriculum vitae, for sure. What else is it? Anyone else? Cool. So who would agree it's a sales document? Yeah, would that make sense? Yeah. I say one of the big things we get on a regular basis, and like I said, the team are here. People will say, "Here's my CV. My friends say it's deadly." It's like, cool. Is your friend giving you a job tomorrow? Because unless they are, it's not for them, nor is it for you. And that's not in a negative way or anything else. You see all the flyers around, ours are around as well. They're sales documents. They're there to provoke an engagement. And a CV is to do what? What are we trying to get it for? What's it trying to get us? Anyone know? A job? It is definitely trying to get us a job, but that's the end game. What do we have to do first? Interview. It's to get us an interview. That's its whole purpose. If it's not getting us an interview, it's not doing its job. If it gets us an interview, great. To what frequency is it now getting us an interview? If it's getting us 1 in 100, it's not working. If it's getting us 3 to 5 out of every 10 applications, we're in a good spot. Yeah, there's probably still a bit of tweaking we can do, but it's in a good spot. Equally, it's not about applying and I'll get into why it's not a good approach later on, this spray and pray approach where we just apply to loads of jobs, that doesn't work, just to clarify. So the big thing with a CV is about making sure it works to get us an interview. That's the first step of it. Would that be a shocking statistic to see? That 75% of CVs are not seen by human eyes? Fortunately, it is, and it's getting worse because what we see now. Has everyone heard of an applicant tracking system or an ATS? Yeah, mostly. So basically, they're just systems. They're an intermediary between when you apply to a job in an organization. Doesn't matter if they're small, medium, or large now. Every single one of them have one. There's very few that don't have an applicant tracking system. The biggest problem with applicant tracking systems is that actually the statistics prove that they are missing out on more suitable candidates than they are finding. It's 51-49 at the minute, which is terrible when you think about it. So if you're a suitable candidate, it's missing out on 5 to 6 of every 10 that apply that are suitable, in terms of ruling them out of the process incorrectly because they're not calibrated correctly. It's one of the part of the work that we do with organizations, because they're putting issues in their own way of finding quality talent. All right, so they can seem like the devil, but knowing how to work against them and work around them is of the utmost importance moving forward. Who would say that's a good-looking CV? Not the person in the picture now. Yeah, who would have a CV that looks like that? No? Okay. So in Ireland right now and in the UK, it's the same. We have the same sort of formats. That particular CV does work in other markets. It doesn't work for us because the systems are calibrated differently. And the reason for that is because when it gets a CV like this, in our applicant tracking systems, the way they're calibrated for the most part, it can look like this. Now, when you bear in mind that recruiters and people that work in talent acquisition are looking for reasons to rule people out because they're getting hundreds of applications, they're going to rule you out. They're not going to go back and say, listen, your CV didn't format correctly. They're going to rule you out of the process, and you're going to get an automatic rejection. Who here is getting any automatic rejections within 24 hours of applying for a job? Anyone? Yeah? Cool. It could be why. The other piece is, even if it does manage to get past some of the imagery, what's going to happen is the formatting can be off. Now, this individual applied, obviously it's a different name that we've used, but you'll see here what it's picked up is not their name, it's picked up a drink that they make. Because they're a bartender, they're making Bloody Marys, it picked that up because of the formatting. So it's one of the biggest CV sins that we see daily is a poor formatted CV. All right, that doesn't work with applicant tracking systems because that is the first hurdle we have to get over. So we need to make sure we're doing that very succinctly, and I'll show you how we do that later. Have to get used to this clicker and see which way. There we go. So who would use the same CV for each role? Yeah, love the honesty. Anyone else? Okay, appreciate it. Cool. We can't. It is a CV sin. All right. Here's the big thing. There's a couple of things we'll look at now that you can do as very simplistic steps to tailor your CV, but you should be tailoring your CV for every approach. The thing I said about earlier, not spraying and praying, which means applying to loads of different jobs. You should be applying for the right job with the right CV to get the right interview to get the right job. Now, that seems like a very easy thing to say, and it is. But it's equally an easy thing to do if done correctly. All right, and that goes back to the strategy piece earlier on and everything else. And that's on the criticism. Nobody has gone and thought everyone, this is exactly how you go get a job. This is exactly what happens. We fall into that process and it works sometimes. Then when it doesn't work, we're wondering why it doesn't. Because nobody's given the exact strategy of how to follow it, all right, or how to do it. We have, on a regular basis, people send us the wrong file. Has anyone sent the wrong file out of curiosity? This particular one was a Jamie Oliver recipe. We've actually had a burrito menu sent to us, applying for a job. We've had other things as well, I won't go into them, but we have had other ones which have been interesting, to say the least. So the big thing is naming your CV correctly. Right now, even that is still very generic, all right? The big thing, if we go back to tailoring a CV, even if you didn't tailor anything else to do with a CV, the first thing that they see attached to an email or attached to your application is your CV. If you just tailor that, simply the name of the CV, it will look tailored. That's the first impression they'll get. The first thing they will assume is that you have tailored your CV, even if you haven't, because you've tailored the name. Now, you should be tailoring your CV, but that's a very simplistic step. By tailoring simply your name of the job, and the company you're applying for, if you did nothing else, it will look tailored. To some degree. Now, there's later things that we'll have to do. But as a starting process, you're starting on the right foot. Who would use keywords? No, sorry, your name of the company, role. Or role, name of the company. Either way is fine. Who would use keywords in their CV? Yeah, good. It comes into something really applicable later on, and it is really important. Now, there's also, you can go too far with keywords too, so it's about making sure we don't go that way either, but it's finding that right happy medium that's going to make sure you're being very easily found, let's say, and that will become really apparent later on as to why. There we go. Irrelevant personal information is one of the other big CV sins that we see. And what I mean by that is, so over-personalizing, whether you go with gender, marital status, whether you have children, not children, your date of birth, sometimes a picture, your actual full address a lot of the time, right? Believe it or not, you can be ruled out of process. I've seen it. It's completely wrong, but I have seen it that you can be ruled out of processes because you've included your full, because of where you live. It's ridiculous, but it does happen, all right? So, with that in mind, I've given loads of insights there as to some of the CV sins we see daily. This is Jenny. It's a false profile, just to clarify. But Jenny has made a series of CV sins. How many would say she's made 3 CV sins by looking at that profile? Who would say 4? Picture, yeah. 5? Who would say more than 5? Who would say 6? 7? Anyone? Jenny's made 8. All right, so we don't use a picture in Ireland and the UK. It is used elsewhere, but just not in this particular landscape. We always use a professional email, not a personal one. Your full address is not needed. Date of birth is not needed. Nationality is not needed. Your marital status not needed. You're also not you're an over-personalized or random URL for your LinkedIn. Hire me, please. Probably won't get you the right outcome for your LinkedIn. And equally, you don't need to comment that what your gender is. It makes none of that information has any impact on your ability to deliver value for that company, which is all your CV is meant to show off. How I've delivered value previously is a direct indicator of how I will deliver value moving forward. And that's all your CV is meant to do. If you're including any of that information, you're actually giving an opportunity to rule you out of a process. Rightly or wrongly, we don't have control over how people's unconscious bias will work. What we can do is make sure we can avoid those challenges. Does that make sense? So there's just some of the CV sins we just talked about. So what you should do, what you shouldn't do. If anyone wants to grab it, they can, and I'll give it 2 seconds to do that. Sorry, some of the formatting's off there for some reason, whichever way that's pulling up. Cool. Good to go. Yes, great question. So you can just put the county, and the county and the country is fine. You can equally put in a suburb if you want. It's not a massive issue. It does. I have seen it, and it does open up particular scenarios. That's all. How come you don't put references? Well, if you think about references now, it's a great question, right? And it's something we can get into a little bit more detail. By saying references upon request actually has no value to your CV, because you're gonna, if they ask for them, you'll provide them. So saying reference, it's just everyone sees that we should do it, or it's been on CVs for years, and then we just follow suit. There's actually no value to it. Equally, if you include references, you're actually giving away someone's personal information on occasion, not always, and you're actually breaking GDPR, believe it or not. So it's just a cultural thing that we do. It's not something that should be done. Equally, I've had loads of people ring me for references that I've never agreed to, because my details have been put on someone's CV. And that could go, I'm always pretty good with that sort of stuff, but not everyone is. So someone could equally give you a bad reference unknowingly. You're giving away a lot of control there over the process. Remember, it's a two-way street when you're doing an interview process or an application process. There's a company process and then there's your process. The two of them have to come together, and it's you interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. So now we'll get into a little bit of actually how to do it, right? So who would say that's a basic looking CV? It is, and I agree with you. And I have loads of cool editing tools, and we can do really weird and wonderful things. We have an AI tool, which I'll talk about in a minute. However, none of that works with the systems that are in place now, because we have no control or any knowledge of what companies have in place in terms of their applicant tracking system. They could be the most advanced systems on the planet, or they could be the worst ones ever made, or they could be the most archaic ones that they continually use because it's integrated into everything. And that happens with a lot of big companies. Some of the biggest companies on the planet have some of the worst internal HR systems. They're brilliant at providing software to others, but they're not great at doing it in-house. All right? So the big thing we need to be aware of is that we have no control over that or no knowledge of that. So what can we do? What's the most effective approach for us? It's to find the suitable solution that works for all, for the large amount of companies, should I say. But the benefit behind this approach is it will work with every single applicant tracking system. That's why we continually use it. Otherwise, we go nice and fancy because it will look an awful lot better. But the benefit behind this one, this particular CV, and we have permission from the client to do it, this exact CV got someone a job within 2 weeks. They were looking for 7 months before that. But in 2 weeks, using this approach, they were able to get there. And it's simple stuff. It's not... Sometimes we can give tips immediately and say, yeah, do this, this, and this, and you'll get there. But largely, it's actually the strategy piece that's probably standing in their way of how they're going about it more than, let's say, the structure or the exact content. It's actually more the approach that they're taking and then how all that builds through everything else. So when we're looking at the... Sorry, I'll jump back quickly. Professional profile, who has one? Yeah, good. When we've done loads of research on this, right? You've got about, it's anywhere between kind of 4.8 to about 5.5 seconds now. It used to be about 6. It's getting an awful lot less. So at the professional profile area is where they spend most of their time. So I don't know if anyone's heard of heat maps, but it's basically where your cursor sits when you're looking at websites, how they know where to put offers and all that sort of stuff on websites. So you basically buy extra stuff, which is, it works really well. We did something similar with CVs. So we basically just figured out where do they actually spend most of their time. The majority of the time that they spend to assess whether they should keep reading your CV and then bring you forward for an interview is in the top area. So once we've got past the applicant tracking system with the right format, the right information, we're then down to the mercy of the recruiter or the talent acquisition person, typically, sometimes the HR function, depending on how the organization's set up. They need to see, within 6 seconds, but certainly normally between 4.8 to 5.5, why they should continue to assess you or continue to consider you for the role. So you might have got past the applicant tracking system. We now need to get past the first level of review, all right? So the professional profile is what does that for you. It's maximum 6 lines. It's basically your mission statement of who you are, what you do, and what value you can bring based on your experience so far and why that is applicable to that business. Once you can convey that, which isn't easy, I'm not going to say it is, but once you can convey that, it immediately grabs traction. The benefit behind that is we dovetail that into how we communicate on LinkedIn and how we communicate in an interview. So getting that particular piece right helps every other part of the process, which is why we spend so much time on it and which is why we have such success with our clients. So make sure you have that area. Once you've done that, you've then got education and qualifications below it, summary of key achievements, competencies, attributes you can tie in as well. Big thing is the achievements piece, the big achievements that you've had. If you haven't got massive ones, it's a bit different. We change up that approach slightly, but typically if you've got experiences, there's some key things in there that we can highlight. Once you've done that, it's then into your career history. So your career history, when we see it all the time, people will say the name of the company, and they could be big, small, or medium. Makes no difference, really. The process is the same. You should have 2 lines explaining who the company are. It doesn't matter if it's Google. Google is massive. There is massive parts of Google. a massive other department. So explaining what the department is, what your role was within it, and then 3 to 5 deliverables in that specific role is key. Certainly for your most recent role. If you've had multiple recent roles for whatever reason, because you weren't finding your feet in the right one, or you didn't enjoy it, whatever it may be, that's absolutely fine. Usually around that kind of 3 mark is ideal. Anything outside the last 10 years is not applicable experience. All right, they will not consider it as valuable experience to the organization, because either you've used the skills you used 10 years ago in another role now, or in another part of your experience, or what's happening is that you haven't used those skills and you therefore need to retrain in them. So basically what we would do there is we would group it under what's called additional experience. All right, and that's literally just an overview of dates you were with the company, the role you had, and the company itself. Yeah. And then you can include languages, hobbies, any of that sort of stuff below that. All that making sense so far? Have I moved through anything too quickly there? Cool, good stuff. Now, who would use the advert when they're applying for a role? Now, I know we look at the advert because that's obviously how we find out about the job a lot of the time. But who would actually use it to help them shape their CV? Deadly. Good. The advert actually has the secret sauce in it to be able to tailor your CV correctly. Because if you think about the advert, everyone's applicant tracking system that they use is built upon the advert that they put out into the market, because what the applicant tracking system is set up to do is gauge your CV versus the job advert. That's how it grades your CV, to tell them if you're a suitable candidate or not a suitable candidate, and how you get past the first level of screening effectively before someone actually looks at your CV. So before we get into that 25% of people, or 25% of CVs that actually are seen by human eyes. Yeah. So knowing that what's happening in the advert is actually going to give you the indicators. So the specific words that they use to explain a requirement or responsibility within the role is how you should exactly articulate it for that particular application. All right, now that can be difficult, but that's if you're sending hundreds of CVs, it's really, really difficult. But if you're sending 10 CVs, it's not that difficult to tailor your approach, which gets you more results. Now, there is ways and means to do this as well, much more effectively, but the big thing with the advert is using that as your secret sauce to getting engagement. Because remember, what's a CV for? An interview, exactly. Who's heard of the hidden job market? Anyone heard of that before? So the hidden job market's really all about, it's not something you can physically find, right? So the big thing that's happening now, and you'll see it more and more, I'm sure a lot of you have seen, even if you're on LinkedIn or not on LinkedIn, it's saying there's hundreds of applications for that particular role, right? So you get to find the role. It might only be up a week and it's like 400 applications, like not applying for that. The reason what's happening now is, and this happened during COVID and it's been kept in place, and it was always happening, but just not to this extent. It was always probably 20 to 30% on average you would see it. Now, the majority of businesses are going headhunting. Yeah, they're not looking for loads of applications all the time for every single role, because they do not have the capacity and time to work through all of the applications to find the right candidate. However, there's multiple tools, LinkedIn being one of them. Every job board that you apply on, Indeed, Irish Jobs, Monster, etc., every single one of them has CV banks that sit on the back of them. So when you apply for a job, your CV is stored, right, based on the skills you included, everything else. I have access to them. All of the recruiters do. A lot of companies do as well. You pay for access to it. I can filter within seconds based on the key requirements I have, the most recent applications or the most recent CVs uploaded to fit that bill. And within seconds, I could identify probably 10 people in the last 24 hours that fit exactly what I'm looking for. Here's the challenge. If you haven't set up your CV or your LinkedIn, same on LinkedIn, I can do the exact same thing because there's tools built on. That's what LinkedIn was built for, believe it or not. It's not it is a professional network now, but they built it purely for the tools that they sell. That's why they did it. Yeah, so when I go onto LinkedIn, I can now find people very, very quickly. And in the same way, none of us, I'm sure none of you go past page 1 or 2 on Google when you're looking for a restaurant in your area, would you? Nobody does. Recruiters don't do it either. They don't need to. Within seconds, we can have information to find the right people that fit the bill. So the most important thing is to be visible. To be visible, you need to include the key skills that are relevant to your field, that align with the jobs that you're applying for. Does that make sense? The benefit is, if you go back to the job advert that I showed you a moment ago, it tells you in each of the job adverts what are the key skills or the critical skills or the key requirements that are really important to the business for that specific role. Yeah? When they're saying that, you'll see a common theme across all the jobs you're applying for. The same skills keep popping up. they're the skills you include, because now you're going, every time they're looking for someone with those skills, going back to the point that if you're looking in for an organization or trying to apply to an organization, they're looking for specific requirements. If it's the same requirements across every single job advert, regardless of the business, you're going to be found in these job banks because they're the skills they're looking for. Does that make sense? Or those CV banks, should I say. So they're not trying to reinvent the wheel. A lot of the adverts that they're pushing out there are very similar to the other adverts of other companies. Yeah, so it's the same skills coming up time and time again. So making sure you're including them in your CV will help you be more visible, and including them on your LinkedIn will help you be more visible, which will help you access this area because they're going looking, and we need to be visible enough to be found. Does that make sense? Cool. So these are just key things that I want you to remember. All right, we're nearly there. So I appreciate all the attention and engagement. Big things just to remember, all right, for when you're going out into the market. There's going to be key aspects, but obviously your CV, LinkedIn, cover letter, all key. Understanding your value was talked a little bit earlier on. Networking is big. Making sure that we know our worth, have a growth mindset. Growth mindset is looking at every challenge as an opportunity. That's really, if we boil it down to nuts and bolts, that's really what we're talking about. There's always going to be challenges. It's how we all unlock those challenges to create opportunities for ourselves. Prepare, and react, and act, don't react. All right? If anyone wants to talk to our team, there's 7 or 8 of us here today. It's quite a few, so we're definitely out in force. And as part of it, we do have our career navigator, which we're showing off today. It's not going to pop up here, unfortunately. It's the link isn't loading the way we wanted it to. But career navigator, I mentioned about tailoring earlier on. It's the first of its kind. It's an AI tool that basically auto tailors your CV. So you upload the job description, you upload your CV, you click a button, it automatically tailors your CV, and you can download a brand new CV that's completely tailored and aligned with the wording of the advert that the company is looking for. So it takes about 10 seconds to do on average. So if you're looking to, I don't agree with spray and pray in any way, shape or form, but I do agree with being efficient in tailoring your approach with the right CV to the right role to get you the right interview. All right. And if anyone is interested in our programs that I mentioned earlier on, when we're there is €100 off today. There's a QR code there as well. All right. So we offer multiple different programs. The team are there. Have a chat with them. If nothing else, you get really good insights on your specific circumstances. But if there's other support that you need, they're also there as well. And there's obviously a discount on them as well. As part of it, we're also giving 30 days free access to Career Navigator with any of the programs. So it means that you get a bit more support as you take that step in your journey. But no matter what, the most important thing, I'm obviously going to stay around for a couple of questions, but there's more of a time for with all of our team down below. But the most important thing is hopefully this was helpful, hopefully it's beneficial, and hopefully it's giving you something that you can implement that will actually have a difference for you, all right? Thank you very much for your time.
Fantastic stuff. Dan Potts, everyone, the career coach. Thank you so much, Dan. Now,